run for the hills, honey, run for the hills. Don't look back. Everything you see is double. Anywhere you go, you lose. When you're lost in the woods and alone in the world too. Another day older, and another day we go. Oh no, alone again with all these people. I can tell you how the story goes. If you die, you just get old. All together, all alone, all alone, all alone. Like your mother and your father too. All grown up, but they're just like you. And you're gonna do it all anew. Better run for the hills, run for the hills, run. Wanna live like an animal, by the skin of your teeth. Put your good face on, not fooling no one. You're a jackrabbit underneath. One step forward, step right back. Run for the hills, honey, run for the hills, honey, run for the hills. Don't look back, don't look back, don't look back. Run for the hills, honey, run for the hills, honey, run for the hills. Don't look back. Everything you see is double. Anywhere you go, you lose. When you're lost in the woods and alone in the world too. One step forward, step right back. I can tell you how the story goes. If you die, you just get old. All together, all alone, all alone, all alone. Like your mother and your father too. All grown up, but they're just like you. And you're gonna do it all anew. Better run for the hills, run for the hills, run.
It's gonna take a little time. You're gonna change your mind. You're gonna toe that line always. What's it gonna take out of me to get me to where I want to be? I say I don't know, I don't know. I say I don't know, I don't know. You've got your on the green, but take a sit down and find out what to lean. I say you will not. Say you will not let it get to you. Just take one breath, just take one step.
Good morning, good morning. Can I get you guys to take your seats, please? Amazing. So here we are on day 2 of the first ever Protocol Community Conference. Did we enjoy day 1? Are we already buying partial shares in Big Time Brewery as our Seattle headquarters? Anything that anyone wants to say about day 1? Remarks, thoughts, feelings? There's some introverts in the crowd. Oh, got it. Yeah. Thank you. Many of you have come up and said, I felt a little bit hopeful yesterday. Okay, that's allowed. Let's keep that going, right? That's kind of the point. So day 2, we have more hard choices for you. Again, this room will be a selection of longer presentations and lightning talks that will be scheduled throughout the day. That's up, and we also have some paper copies there that you can look at that should be correct and locked down for today. The other, that would be good if it showed again.
Just hold the mic against it, that makes it work.
Yeah. I gotta go to the stage manager. There we go. And then we have really hard choices. So many of you submitted suggestions for group discussions. We're not doing full unconference. That was a choice that we made. Slightly regretting not having a third day to just do some hacking and more group discussions, but here we are. So this afternoon, starting at 11:30, we will actually have 3 full tracks to choose from. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, split your forces, find a buddy. Remember that the talks in here are recorded, but will also be amazing and impactful. So we've got the Madrona room. What we noticed yesterday, anyone who made it to the Madrona room did not come back. But I checked in and everyone was just having really great discussions there, which is great. So you'll have to make those choices. Stream Place is the larger room that's farther back. The Blue Sky room is the one that's closer in. You're also welcome to self-organize connecting with people. I don't know why it keeps doing that. And we'll have some space over there to find each other. I think the hallway con is going okay? Okay, good stuff. Any questions?
I want to make one last pitch for, of course, the talks in the main room. They are recorded, but one of the things that we should remember, this is where we're having a lot of these conversations for the first time. So if you want any of your questions for these speakers on video, make sure that you catch the talks, and so that all the people out there streaming and later finding these talks and trying to draft off of what we've been discussing will also have those amazing resources and awesome questions.
Amazing. What else do we need to cover?
The breaks that we have are the same time as yesterday, so we will have a coffee break briefly after our first talk, and then lunch should be 12:45 to 2, I believe. And then we've got an afternoon break as well. Those are the times where food, roughly speaking, will be showing up. So for example, if you've been in discussions all day and you really need a drink or a banana or something like that, there will be food over here in the afternoon.
Amazing. I will hand it to you to intro our first speaker.
Great, thank you very much. Really appreciate the thoughtfulness and the amazing speakers that we've had yesterday, and looking forward to more of the same today. As I mentioned at the end of the day, yesterday was kind of like where we've been and what are the futures that we have thought of in the past, and I wanted to introduce our speaker for this morning. Let me make sure that Aaron, can you hear us?
I can hear you. I can only see the very tops of the tallest people's heads.
Okay,
there we go. Now I've got faces.
So, Erin unfortunately couldn't make it, and I'll let her talk about that. But Erin Kisane is a researcher, writer, and I will dare say community leader who we have known for a long time. And I first became aware of Erin's work back with the content strategy book that she published a while ago, and then also through Open News and trying to bring more technologists into journalism and help the media ecosystem move forward, but then also was instrumental in the COVID tracking project and assembling the forces that needed to come together in order to help us make sense of what was going on during a period of tumult. Since then, has also written quite meaningfully and movingly about the influence of social media on various different parts of the world. And so we were really excited to have Erin give us some thoughts and talk about where we can go and why we are all here. Humanity has definitely been a theme throughout her work, and we're really excited to welcome her here to speak with us this morning. So I will pass it over to Erin. And a round of applause, please.
Please don't clap. Can you hear me okay? And you can see a slide, yeah? Okay, we're business. I'm so bummed that I can't be there in the room with you, and I'm also very excited not to give you the lung crap that I have right now. So I had to call Ted 2 days ago and say, you don't want me in your space. Please bear with me. I had to take a lot of Benadryl last night, drank a lot of coffee this morning. It's not a perfectly ideal situation for the flame of cognition, but we're going to give it our best shot. I should just give you that was a great intro. Thank you. Ooh, there we go. I want to say thank you to Ted and to Boris and to everybody who's been making this all work. The streaming experience has actually been really good, and it's been fun to see the experiments with streaming that are going on, and also having a YouTube channel for when that doesn't work as well. And also thank you to the Blue Sky folks who have been army crawling along on this work for the 2-year decade that you've just been through. Thank you especially to Ted, who's been making sure that I could actually make it to the screen this morning. I want to just situate, thank you for the great intro. I am a writer and researcher working on the internet, both as in trying to make the internet itself better, in early advocacy for accessibility in the open web and better networks, but also trying to do useful things on the internet, like building more humane forms of journalism and doing that pandemic work. But I'm here specifically, and I think the reason Boris and Ted asked me here is that right now I'm really trying to come in as someone who's done both of those things and try to produce knowledge and thinking that's useful to people who are working on at Proto, but also across all of the decentralized and new network experiments and projects that are happening right now, which is a roundabout way of saying that I also work on Fediverse stuff, but I've come around. I was a little bit of a skeptic on the App Proto stuff, but it's been an amazing couple of years watching this come together as an open ecosystem, and it was a great day of talks yesterday that I watched. So I'm going to jump in. Last summer, I gave a talk at the XOXO Festival in Portland about my own experience kind of giving up on the social internet because of its predatory structures and incentives, down with all of this sort of thing. And then really getting pulled back into that world by my pandemic work and being kind of convicted that we actually do have to make the big world networking work and work much better to accomplish some very baseline goals like collective survival. And I ended that talk with a call to dig into the social and technical aspects of making networks that are safer and more habitable and better at helping us find the people we need to be working with. And, that went over reasonably well. It was like an internet nerd festival, but people had questions, which was like, how? And I have thoughts about this that I've been dragging around for years. And I imagine that my next talk, I'd really get to be way nerdier and get into these questions of like how our work is like forestry and the problem with Heidegger's standing reserve and what we can learn from the magnificent sustainability of coppicing and pollarding practices. And I had my next painting picked out that I was going to, build the talk around, which is Bruegel's Gloomy Day. This is the second Bruegel you're getting in 2 days. Thank you, Blaine. Look at this. This is great. I had a whole thing planned out. We were going to talk about what it means to do this traditional forestry practice. But then, the election happened and the rapid descent into authoritarian rule and dismantling of the administrative state. So here we are. And I want to push aside some of those more abstract things and get down to some absolute basics that are things I think we are all going to need very much right now. At the same time, I'm extremely resistant as a person to like offering prescriptions. Like I came up in the early world of user experience and I really don't believe in taking advice from random talkers when you could be communicating with the people whose needs you're trying to meet. But there are a few things that have come up over and over again across all the work I've been doing, and things that I think are especially essential right now, and that even though they're not maybe fully cooked, I wanted to bring to you so that we can think about them together in a community of practice. So they're coming out of a particular perspective. So I want to just briefly mention the 3 projects that I've worked on that have most shaped my thinking on this. One is the COVID tracking project that Ted mentioned. And I get into that in the XOXO talks online. There's a bunch of stuff that you can find if you want. But I'll just say, like, my experiences there with a project that was so much on and of the network that could never have happened without a mass outpouring of time and attention and love from hundreds of total strangers online. Really did change the way I think about the necessity of big world networking specifically. That work also put me into direct contact and conflict with organized, sophisticated, hybrid online, offline campaigns designed to lie to people about reality, which changed some things in my brain. Another one, some in-depth ethnographic work I did last year with Darius Kazemi, who is maybe in the room now, interviewing a bunch of really delightful people about the material realities of running Fediverse servers. And also my work on what turned out to be like a 40,000 word incident report synthesizing accounts of the role that Facebook and Meta played in a genocide in Myanmar in 2017 of the Rohingya people. And that was a thing I had read about and kind of seen go by as an interested observer, but didn't think I completely understood, and which turned out to be, honestly, something much more terrifying than I had imagined, really an example of a kind of carelessness and callousness and refusal to hear increasingly desperate warnings from civil society. And I want to note, like, I work on this stuff that is occasionally extremely gruesome, not because I really want to tell everyone how awful the social internet is, although some of it is bad, but because I love us and I don't want us to fall into the same pit traps and potholes from our past. Like, I wanted us to fall in new potholes and make new and different mistakes. So those are the things that are kind of running alongside my overall like couple decades of experience as like a terminally architecture brain person watching network dynamics across communities and networks since Twitter was a tiny baby and Blaine was doing the things he talked about yesterday. So those are my priors, maybe less in like the philosophical sense and more as a series of crimes. But I want to get into two things specifically that I think may be useful to think about together. And so this is going to be two short talks about two different things. And the first one is vulnerable people. I feel like the idea of listening to vulnerable people is something that's been coming up for so long and frankly to so little effect that it kind of triggers reflexive eye rolls. Like the most superficial and self-serving kind of corporate social responsibility stuff. I have rarely seen it operationalized in meaningful or sustained ways on social internet projects, except for when those projects actually emerge from communities that are typically harassed and targeted. But I'm an optimist. I still think this is actually a centrally important thing. And I think it's not being operationalized because it's not especially legible as a practice that especially small technology teams and projects can actually do. Which I think is especially important for an ecosystem like the one that AtProto is enabling, because it's not going to be one monolithic company working on this stuff and figuring it all out. It's a bunch of people working at very different levels who could really use some common knowledge to build from, and that's something that comes up a lot in conversations with people that I'm working with who are doing stuff in these ecosystems. So I want to say I don't mean like social listening, like following the discourse for reactions. That's fine and valuable sometimes. But I want to talk about actively seeking out like the intelligent and informed perspectives of the most vulnerable people in groups that you're building for before and during rollouts and changes, and in some fairly specific ways. But like, rewind why the most vulnerable people. This one's easy. It's because if you can keep the most vulnerable people safe, you can keep everyone safe. But if you just make a bunch of rigid decisions based on vibes and without like real ongoing consultation with heavily targeted communities, you can't really do this. And also, if you only respond to the loudest voices, you're going to miss a lot. So one way I think that it's useful to think about this is the idea of social threat modeling. And this is not new. I think there's at least one person at the conference, John Pincus, who's been writing about this since 2017, 2018, working on this with, I think, predominantly Black women on Twitter. It's not a new idea, but I want to talk specifically about, a potential practice of collaborative social threat modeling. And this is drawing heavily on a lot of the work that the EFF has been doing for a long time. They talk a lot about data harms, but understand that that overlaps with many kinds of social harms. So I would love to be thinking about how we can build knowledge across this ecosystem, across maybe other ecosystems as well, with communities that involve building places to ask questions like, as the people inhabiting our systems, what do you need to protect? And from whom do you need to protect it? And what vectors do those people use? Like, we don't actually have to make guesses about this. People know, they have lived experience with this. How bad are the consequences if those things aren't protected? What actually happens to you in your life? And this is changing. The way that social data is being weaponized is changing from week to week right now in the US. So I think this would be an excellent moment to dig into this kind of work. And then, what are the elements of the things that we're making that make it harder for you to protect what you need to protect, and what can we do to help? I was reading a great paper that I'll link to about building social threat modeling into early, like, introductory CS courses for people who are starting to think about system architecture. And one of the things that came out of that paper working with undergraduates was that it would be useful to actually maybe move it from a strictly negative practice and into something more like collaborative risk-benefit analysis. So working with people from various different communities about, what are the trade-offs? How you would characterize the risks posed by the kinds of design choices we're making, how we can reduce that risk or boost your benefit, and like what's helping, what's working. There's a fantastic report that came out, I think, end of last year from a group called the Engine Room that's London-based. And they went around and spoke with people in sort of digital rights and activist communities in the global South about what their experiences were with new networks. And they came in, I think, wanting to understand, like, how can we get these people into, I think at the time, mostly the Fediverse, because Blue Sky was really just emerging at that point. But the responses they got back were so sophisticated in a sense of trade-offs and the risk-benefit balances that they actually wound up writing a very different kind of report, which was, what are the understandings of these people in authoritarian and oppressive regimes who are making calls about which networks to use because their people are in different places, because their data is being weaponized in different ways. There's a lot of actually quite sophisticated knowledge about this stuff just floating around if you go out and get it. But to do this work, I think we do have to acknowledge that, we got to talk about who's vulnerable. And that involves making value judgments about whose needs get prioritized, which is something that's often, I think, really uncomfortable in a lot of tech spaces. But the reality is, of course, if you're building social tools, you're actually making those kinds of ethical calculations, whether you want to or not. Not making a choice is making a choice. Letting it get handled by business logic is a decision that's going to have real world consequences. Ursula Franklin, who someone Blaine quoted yesterday, she's like one of my favorite technology thinkers. She was a physicist and a peace activist, Quaker, German-Canadian Holocaust survivor. And she was someone who thought and spoke about the connection between technology and justice and fear. And she was very sharp about the idea of justifiable fear. And she was very clear about what that meant. For her, that was, people who were worried that they wouldn't be able to feed their children, or of our brothers and sisters who have reasons to fear the knock on the door at night. So I think there are ways to be very clear about real harms, obvious harms, that can allow us to define the kinds of groups we want to, not necessarily build an entire application entirely focused only on those needs, but especially when it comes to both exposure of different kinds of information, design choices, and also just a sense of, like, who are we keeping in the conversation? Maybe a year ago, it seemed a little bit over the top to talk about fearing the knock on the door at night, but I think it's a little bit less so right now. And I think if we can dig into that work as a group, maybe that even moves us a little closer toward the design justice community. It's an approach and sort of a network. Sasha Costanza-Chalk's excellent book really pulls together the threads from that work over the last many years. It's an approach to design that's led, Sasha says, by marginalized communities and that aims to challenge rather than reproduce structural inequalities. And again, this is stuff that like emerges from digital rights work, that emerges from kind of an activist mode. But I think it's becoming clearer that there are necessary connections between that world and what we think of as perhaps a more purely technical world. So one of the problems with doing this kind of thinking and digging and communal knowledge building is that it's very hard to do this if you are crunching away at something really highly technical, something that you have to produce very quickly. Maybe you're building a protocol. Like, where are you going to, who's going to do this? Are you going to have a team? Like, you don't even probably have a user research person. Now you're going to build like a threat modeling crew. So I think something that I'm really interested in is what is the shape of an institution or an institutions or a community of practice that could do this kind of work and share it across projects? And that brings me to the second piece I want to talk about, which is useful institutions. And specifically, I want to talk about them as vernacular institutions. Some people in the room, when I say vernacular, may be thinking linguistics. Some of you may be thinking architecture. Some of you may be wondering what this has to do with anything. I'm going to come at it from an architecture point of view, as in vernacular as opposed to monumental. The vernacular is the homegrown. It's what emerges from a locality. In architecture, the vernacular is a traditional Basque farmhouse. Or it is the way you build homes in Greece to deal with the extraordinarily high wind and solar exposure. Or it is my favorite example of this completely badass yurt, which has all of these new school materials put together in an extremely traditional way, down to the like awesome ram horn stuck in there in the webbing. So this is vernacular in the sense of architecture. What does vernacular mean when we talk about institutions? Some of the kinds of historic institutions that people discuss as vernacular are like the benevolent societies and the aid and pleasure clubs, social aid and pleasure clubs that are in New Orleans that are 200 years old and still running. The free medical clinics in Greece, the people's free medical clinics run by the Black Panthers in the United States, freedom schools, right now, local mutual aid projects, but also indigenous institutions through history and around the world that focus on conflict resolution and the maintenance of justice. So vernacular institutions are emergent and they are highly local. They serve needs on the ground and not the needs of the state. If you can't tell that the specter of James C. Scott is like floating over all of this stuff, it is. They serve not just the needs of, they do not serve the needs of the state, but also they do not serve the needs of whatever layer it is that is substituting for the state. So perhaps the corporate hegemony of the current state of the internet. Vernacular institutions are more useful than they are legible. And this has been brought home to me as particularly double-edged in the last year, especially because in the Fediverse governance research project I work on, the need for vernacular network institutions came up a lot. People didn't necessarily use that the exact language, but when we talk to people who are doing the work of thoughtfully governing Fediverse servers, the idea of a collective action problem came up all the time. There was all this stuff that needed to be done that really couldn't be done by individual teams and people running servers. They needed someone else to do that work. And there actually was an institution that came up in almost every single interview, which was IFTAS, Independent Federated Trust and Safety. That was an organization founded to listen to the needs of people running servers and then build out the tooling and capacities that they needed, including, software for handling shared block lists and also quite recently the Fediverse's first viable CSAM detection and reporting system. And in conversations that we had with server runners, it was really clear that they considered that work essential and foundational, but also just the start of what they needed. So we kept hearing, maybe IFTAS could also do this or handle that. That was a real common thread, which is why it is such a bummer that what has happened between last summer when we finished that research and now is that IFTAS has actually begun the process of shutting down because the organization couldn't secure enough funding to keep going. And I think that's for several reasons. I don't want to get super far down that rabbit hole, but in my conversations with Jazz Michael King, who founded IFTAS and still is going to run, whatever it winds up being later, is that IFTAS was not legible to the kinds of organizations that could have provided longer term funding. It was something that ran at a level beyond what simple sort of small dollar crowdfunding could do. The Fediverse is still very tiny. But to keep that network safe and viable, there was a lot of relatively expensive work that needed doing and the civil society organizations that he spoke with just really couldn't understand the shape of IFTAS. So I think something really crucial for us to be thinking about, and I think a lot of you already are, is that vernacular institutions actually are and are embedded in vernacular economies. This is a term from Ivan Illich's work. My favorite sort of place, my favorite writer who gets into this isn't actually Illich, whose ideas I love, but whose writing I find really annoying and difficult to read. Alistair MacLean's Soil and Soul details vernacular economies that he experienced in the Hebrides and gets into the way that layers of what he calls like a full mutuality and also a layer of reciprocity and sort of a formal barter system work together to create a functioning vernacular economy. I think you see echoes of this in the commons management practices that Eleanor Ostrom gets into, another really fruitful zone. Also, a few months ago, I sort of ran into this relatively obscure work from the 90s that a scholar named Muhammad Abdullah Ibn Salah did on the entangled social and built worlds of this traditional settlement in Saudi Arabia, in a settlement called Al-Khalaf. And this is just a tiny thing way down in, you know, the kind of stuff that I really love the most and get stuck in. But I want to bring it to you because I think it's the kind of example that maybe enlivens our thinking here. He wrote about a tool-making institution in this traditional, very agricultural community. And the institution was called Al-Rusameh. It's a social convention, he wrote, that regulated the work between farmers and skilled laborers, so carpenters and ironsmiths, leather makers, people who made the tools essential to make the agricultural economy work. And when farmers needed tools, they would pay in full for their new tool or piece of equipment. But Al-Rusameh paid for its maintenance forever. And as a result, the community shared about 1% of the value of their total agricultural product with this tool-making community. And that was understood as the way that you keep this group viable. You allow them to maintain their workshops. And then when your stuff breaks, you bring it to them and they fix it forever. This is one of, you know, tens of thousands of these kinds of institutions through human history. And I feel like we have a very impoverished zone right now of economic exchange. I mean, God bless micropayments, right? But come on, we actually have an entire human history of vernacular institutions and economies, of communities that have found ways to make this stuff work in genuinely sustainable ways. So it turns out I do actually get to talk a little bit about this painting today, in that, you know, this is a painting that represents a very ancient set of practices. It's the way that you maintain the kind of wood harvest that you need to be able to do your agricultural and building and various other kinds of work over time without actually losing all of your forests. And it's embedded in these traditional community practices. There's also people eating like festival waffles and a whole thing going on there, but we won't get into that. The thing I love about this painting is that that's the work in the foreground, right? But if you look back and see what's happening behind it, there's actually such an intense storm out at sea that it's breaking the ships. And in the back, you have this monumental fortress that's being encroached on by a glacier. So there's a lot of really heavy shit happening in this painting. But what we get to focus on is this steady work of, you know, basic human vernacular economy and institution that preserves human life, even as all of these, you know, bigger enterprises are coming to ruin. So maybe it's clear why I find some comfort in that idea right now. I want to land this on some thought from one of my favorite sort of cantankerous thinkers from the movement world, David Graeber, who wrote that the ultimate hidden truth of the world is that it is something that we make and could just as easily make differently. I think a lot of the story of the last 15, 20, 25 years has been about the conflict between, on one hand, in technology. The idea that the right way to make things with our new technologies on the internet, on the social internet, is to be at least sort of blandly decent, to recognize a minimum responsibility for what happens to people who use our products, and bow to some social norms about not hosting and accelerating violent hate speech or becoming the infrastructure from which genocides are launched. And on the other hand, the idea that actually the whole point of having the internet and these new networks and capital is the freedom to throw all the norms and quotidian decencies that might let us coexist into the garbage, and instead do whatever results in the biggest individual advantage. And I think it's, you know, fairly clear which of these philosophies is ascendant in a good chunk of tech right now, when we're in this incredibly gonzo moment when both the president of the United States and like the billionaire shadow daddy both own their own personal social networks, and are in extremely tightly with these massive hegemonic tech companies that control so much public discourse and surveillance surfaces. But what I see here and in many other parts of the movement toward open protocols and non-centralized networks is the crucial and frankly subversive liberty, the sense that the liberty of our work is not actually an adolescent freedom from caring what we do to other people, but the freedom to actually care as much as we fucking want to about the effects of our work in the world. Or thank you. I have notes and citations coming at this address. It's not up right now because after Ted and I set up the Zoom first thing this morning, I couldn't use my machine to push it to the repo, but that'll be up very soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aaron. We're going to do questions a little bit differently today. We're still going to form a line up front, and we'll make sure that both Aaron can hear us and the folks on the stream can hear us. So if we've got questions, please come on up. Aaron, can you see me if I stand right here?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Can you see me if we stand right here?
I can see you. You're good. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Questions for Aaron. All right. Wait for John to come on up.
Great talk. You know, on the social, on the social threat modeling side, looking at things like North Sky and Black Sky, you can see some of these things are starting to happen of their own accord in the atmosphere. What are the things at the institutional level, or whether it's formal institutions or informal things, what could help goose that process along, if you will?
I mean, I think Black Sky is like the emblematic vernacular institution for our moment right now. What can goose it along? I mean, I think, to me, just getting these ideas into the conversation, talking about the fact that like there's this whole layer of sort of social protocol that we could actually be working on together alongside the technical protocol that AtProto was actually, clearly built to run alongside this kind of social conversation. So I don't know what can goose it besides a certain amount of like, maybe some shock and terror about the state of things, but more joyfully, I think, honestly, getting people together in places like this and talking about like, you know, what are the things we can be working on together on the social and cultural side alongside the tech. Seems like a good start to me. So thanks, Boris and Ted.
Yeah, absolutely. Kenyon?
Yeah. Hi, Aaron. Great talk. So kind of following up on that, because my question, I am a current CS student. Where do you see strategic threat modeling fitting in best into curriculums, and how would they kind of go out to things like the tech boot camps and the smaller programs out there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll make sure that when I post the notes and sites, I link to, I think it's like a 2023 paper about some experiments it was like, how do we stop talking about things that make the students' eyes glaze over, like ethical computing, which I think we're certainly in a moment where that's like being pushed aside, and get into something that's like more tactical, more like that we can get our hands around. I think building something like social threat modeling, whether it's collaborative or not, into those conversations as maybe a more practical way into thinking about like ethics in tech. Would be really interesting. And something that I really liked about this specific paper is that they were talking about it at the systems architecture level. So it wasn't like a UX project. It was like, when we're doing the architectural work, how do we build that stuff in? So I think that's a great start. It would be amazing if boot camps could be thinking about this. And I honestly, like, given my own experience doing, user research and UX work alongside so many different kinds of tech projects, I think the more practical, like, the closer to the ground this work is, the faster students will actually begin using it and putting it to work, getting it out of sort of the realm of philosophy or something that we should aspire to into something that, like, you can get 5 people around a table and bust this out in an afternoon, just like buy the pizza. I'm a pragmatist, so I think just getting into it and starting it, trying it, and publishing the results would be amazing.
Hi, Aaron. Really appreciate your talk, Jazz, from the Blue Sky team. So I have a question. I mostly work on infrastructure, but whenever we do feature work, there's a lot of internal conversation and internal red teaming of how is the feature that we're going to build going to be used to hurt people and abuse, and how do we,
of course,
how do we design features in such a way that we minimize the potential harms and maximize the potential goods of features? And it feels like every time you build a feature, you're always dissatisfied with the end result that you get to, because there is no way to build something that cannot be used to do harm, because then you would build nothing at all. So I guess how do you navigate that in a way and like come to satisfying conclusions that help you be happy with what you ship and with what you're building?
Yeah. God, thank you for asking such a well-formed question. Something that I've been so impressed with, coming out of just from the beginning of the things that Jay was talking about initially, but also just the way Blue Sky has rolled things out. It's so clear that y'all are being so incredibly thoughtful. Being thoughtful doesn't mean you'll get it right, obviously. And like what's right is going to change through time also. And I'm glad that you mentioned, like, I think there's specifically the danger of paralysis, right? Like, I'll tell you, after I did the research on like what happened in Myanmar and like what Meta did, I was like, maybe we should just fucking stop all of this internet shit and just like roll it back. I don't know, like who among us is actually really qualified to make these kinds of calls? But then I talked more with the people who were actually doing the work in Myanmar, and they were like, the people doing the digital rights work, the sort of Burmese organizations that sprang up to do this stuff were like, no, we really, really need the technology. What we need is for people to hear us. We're here. We're collecting the knowledge. We can bring it into companies and explain what's going on. And they did that with Meta. Meta just chose to not understand it, to not hear it. I think especially as Blue Sky and AtProto is not just dealing with problems in the US, the fact that there are all of these civic society organizations globally who actually possess a huge amount of knowledge about this stuff is someplace that I would want to be, digging into someone like Victoire Rio, who started a new organization in Europe to try to make some of this information more legible, as someone to talk to. But like, it's always going to be a balance, right? It's always going to be, if you're going to make things, if you're going to do the experiments, you're going to get some of them wrong. But having connections to at least representatives of communities that are experiencing the most harm, so that you don't have to just game it out by yourselves. I think whenever it's especially scary to me, making decisions sort of alone in a room with other people who are like us, right? So connections into those groups who can bring in things that we would not necessarily have thought of seems really crucial to me. But yeah, like, I appreciate so much the work that you all have been doing to try to make things as safe as possible, while moving also extremely quickly. So yeah, it's hard. Thank you.
So I had a couple questions. One was kind of, you touched on, Jazz kind of talked to it a bit, and then you brought it up in your response, which is the ever-evolving part of safety, and how one group that may have been marginalized at one point then becomes the oppressor later on, and how to build into your systems the ability to find that and kind of reflect. It just seems like, especially when you're dealing with code, like, it's very easy for what once worked to then get gamed out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think actually, borrowing from just InfoSec world, things are always changing on that side, right? It's not like the kinds of threats that you experience in an InfoSec way are going to be static. That's the whole game. It's always an arms race. It's always changing. And the players change. Sometimes it's nation states, sometimes it's, sort of scam hives, sometimes it's both. I think taking that kind of posture toward cultural threats is also really useful, and just maintaining like low center of gravity and understanding that these things, the cultural landscape is going to shift just as much as the like things we think of as security problems, as network abuse, as all of that stuff. I think that's a useful and sort of pragmatic way to ground that work. It's a hard question, right? And things are changing all the time. And like, I am very aware of like what's changing in the US and Canada, but like things move very fast in all kinds of places, in ways that actually do play into the network world. So I like the posture of taking this as like ultimately a security question, but sort of on the cultural side, and just assuming that like you've got to be out there doing the listening and detection work, or you're gonna get overwhelmed by something you didn't see coming.
And then the other question was, you brought up a really interesting example with out of Saudi Arabia, the economic model of basically the capital expense and then kind of a maintenance payment that was used to sustain the production chain during times when there wasn't that capital income. And it seems like right now in our economy, we've kind of built that maintenance cost into the capital expense. And I'm just wondering, are there any good models that you've seen in the Western world of how to kind of break that kind of preempting the, like, we made a thing, now we have to live on it for the next 20 years while we sustain it. And like, yeah, I'm just wondering how to kind of, if you've seen any good models in the Western world.
I mean, I think there's actually a ton of stuff happening thank you for the question. Those were great questions. At the community levels, I think that this is also just a question that we're all confronting really hard. I mean, there's no conversation about this stuff that doesn't deal with economics, right? There's no question about this stuff. offline in like the mutual aid world that doesn't involve like how do we sustain these efforts to keep each other alive, right? If we lose things like the governmental capacity to handle certain kinds of things, what are we going to do to come up with something that can be sustained at the more local level? So I would myself say like this is something that I'm still digging into. I don't know that I have like an obvious modern model. I actually think looking at the economic model that the Black Panthers used is a really good start. They were doing some incredibly sophisticated stuff all over the U.S., and that was not actually very long ago to get free clinics and free schools and all of those things up and continue to run. But I think that this is one of the big open questions, right? Sorry, I know we're getting over on time, Ted. How are we?
No, we're totally good. We've got more.
Okay. I tried to talk fast.
I'll try to. Hi, thanks for the great talk, and I appreciate all the references. I'm curious in your research and what you've seen in like organizations and companies when they do fail to protect those who are like most vulnerable and those who are harmed. I know the Meta example is like very much an extreme case, but like across the board, what have you seen that causes them to fail to do that? Like, is it a refusal to care, or like this recklessness, or is it just like systematically, organizationally? And then like how can we preempt those failures, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, God, it happens at so many levels, right? I think honestly, like so much of it, like the meta stuff is really extreme. I think it is very, very common that it's just a question of we are moving really fast and trying to do like the right thing while continuing to move forward as fast as we can, and we miss things, right? And what it is that falls into the sort of acceptable externalities depends on who's in the room. So I think that is like where I would go to for that, is like getting people into those rooms who have varied experience, who have connections into communities that have varied experience is the critical thing, especially for teams and projects that are trying to move quickly and that don't have access to like massive monumental institutional research programs, which is almost everyone. But I do think that like the meta thing is a useful example of like how you build a massive global corporation that is very concerned with pushing useful knowledge away from its core. That's certainly a corrective, a thing to build away from. But again, like I do think it tends to be more a question of just like missing things or just prioritizing them down because maybe we thought that it didn't matter as much, that maybe what we did online didn't have as much of a direct effect on what happens offline. But I think the experience of the last couple of decades and certainly years should have proved that wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Amazing. Legibility has been coming up a lot for me in so many different ways. And I feel like we're collectively feeling our way through to the types of vernacular institutions, thank you for the phrasing, that we need. And it feels very hard because a lot of these things feel like first time, and where do we get this information? So I'm leaning into things like Coase's theory of the firm, and I'm like, oh, we're in the network era, and there's interesting things happening. Over the next 12 months, and I'm saying that because you already said, bummed I couldn't be there, do it again next year, so there's some pressure there, right? Can you maybe talk about some emerging legibility you see, or some thoughts about how we hint to others that might want to join us, what sort of signals we send?
Yeah, I mean, I think I should say out loud that illegibility cuts both ways, right? It's actually also extremely protective. And I think the usefulness of vernacular institutions and vernacular economies is that they can stay below the radar, or even if not below the radar, like just hard to pin down. And I think AppProto is, this is an ecosystem that was made to be hard to pin down, right? Like that was the original promise of the internet. So I do think that leaning into institutions that are hard to pin down, models of organizing ourselves that can't be easily decapitated, like there's something really important there. In terms of like how you gain the positive benefits of legibility while staying like appropriately illegible, like that's hard. I do think that there are people with connections to what I think of as like more monumental funding models who are getting pretty curious about this stuff. You see that here. Thanks, we saw, Peter yesterday had some great things to say about that. I think, man, how do you get people? I mean, can you do more of these? That's one piece. No, but I think continuing to demonstrate that there's like a real thing here. There's gonna be a gap, right? And what you I think want to do is get as far along as you can before you fall into the danger of full capture, right? So I don't know the answer to that, but I do think the idea of like trying to maintain that liberty, trying to maintain the right level of illegibility, and trying to be hard to pin down and decapitate, while also finding the representatives from some sort of more monumental structures who can do things like provide stabilizing funding, like. That is the real challenge, right? And sometimes you're going to get captured and eaten, and that's how it goes. Like, there's no way to always avoid that. But that's why maybe a multiplicity of institutions becomes so extremely important. That was not a real answer, but that was the best one I had.
That was amazing. Thank you. We are all geese.
Yes.
Thank you for your talk. That was really good, and it's something that we're thinking about. I know there's a lot of people in this room who are building. I know that I'm building, and there's a lot of people in this room who are thinking about building. So I think this is kind of a unique opportunity to ask you, do you have anything on your wish list, like physical things that you feel like should get built? Maybe specific app views or web views or features that you want to see in the things that people are building right now?
Oh man, I do not myself have that list. I think that would be a good thing to have. I'm really excited about so many things that so many people are working on right now, that I didn't come with like a wish list. And maybe this is partly just my orientation. Like I'm all about sort of process over solutions, right? So how you're making things is, I think, the thing that I am most excited about. I also love the things that are being made. But like Ms. Belba's talk yesterday was such a great way to end the day, thinking about like how you do this stuff, how you bring the knowledge into communities. I think the orientation is like the most critical thing for me. What actually gets made is going to come out of the needs of these various communities and in the interest of developers, which is extraordinarily powerful thing. Like developer motivation is like a nuclear force, right? Like that's great. So to me, it's sort of a question of just like making sure that the orientation is tied into these like cultural concerns. If it's a bummer to always think about it as threat modeling, maybe it is that like risk benefit thing. But yeah, that's a total non-answer. But I'm excited about everything that's getting made, so I don't have favorites. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Erin, for these amazing, like the vernacular organizations thing, like actually legitimately blew my mind when you first said it. So I'm like, it gives us modes of being able to talk about what we're building, the sorts of things that we want to see in the world, and also how we interact with existing structures, which I think is super important for us to figure out, and as we are trying to make change. So thank you very much for all these amazing thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you for the questions, and thank you for all those amazing answers. And yes, next year, I guess.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, so we are on break now, so please feel free to get more coffee, other things to eat, and we will be back in, I think, 15 minutes.
15 minutes.
Aaron, thank you so much. That was incredible.
Lost baggage of a wicked youth. I need some money to tell the truth. I'm stretched out forever, lonely as America. Lost baggage of a wicked youth. Lost baggage of a wicked youth. The years are behind me, make no excuse. The world was a good place to buy in or hide out. Growing older, but that's nothing new. What you don't understand now, what you can't understand, you can make it mean anything or anything you want. Make it mean anything or anything you want. But what I give for another look, just a creature misunderstood, yeah. I'm a savage sitting on display. Do what you want, sunshine when the sun shines on the wrong day. And I believe my bed is a constant bearer of these sunshades. Cause I'm a little sunshine when the sunlight beckons. I wake up, oh, I won't wake up.
I make my days, my nights. That's when my heart gets pumping. I'll take you for a ride. My nights only just started. Show me some place I like. Make me feel like I'm dreaming. Oh, and I won't wake up. Though I don't know where to go. Night never done much for me, but lead me down a lonely road. Hit the light so I can see that I'm a little sunshine. I'm a little sunshine. Why are your eyes still closed? Can't do much when we're sleeping. I'll wake you up and show the night is where my heart is. You won't need daylight to feel like I'm close to me. And we'll stay out. Though I don't know where to go. Night never done much for me, but lead me down a lonely road. Hit the light so I can see that you and me are company. Not to make the sun explode, but lose the lights in harmony. In the night I'll have control. 'Cause I'm a little sunshine. I'm a little sunshine. I'm a little sunshine. natural the way I am lost in this. You asked to meet me, and I insist. Can't you feel it streaming across the walls? It's magnetic. It pulls me forward, begging me to fall. And if it's right, will these pieces fit together? Will you and I collide into each other? Footsteps shaking. I have never crossed a line like this before. Yet I won't waver as I walk across the floor. You were waiting, and I am yours. Can't you feel it streaming across the walls? It's magnetic. It pulls me forward, begging me to fall. And if it's right, will these pieces fit together? Will you and I collide into each other? Tonight you're separated. You need me more. We're at the beginning. Oh, you are. I walked up a line and you and I are one. There's no way to fight it. Then if it's right, will these pieces fit together? That you and I collide into each other. And if it's right, will these pieces fit together? Will you and I collide into each other?
Right, we're about to get started again in this main room with Rudy Frazier talking about the founder and creator of Black Sky. Okay. Boris?
So just before Rudy gets started, where is Tessa? Over there. Come on down. Come on down. Come on down. Come on down. So as I said, starting at 11:30, you have to make a decision between 3 tracks. I actually lied. I was illegible when I said that. There are infinite spaces to have hallway con things. We have 2 other rooms over there, and we have a spot where you can pitch rooms and put your, hey, let's meet at X time. And Tessa has gone first and picked a time and is now going to tell you why you should make a choice to track number 4 this afternoon. Tessa.
Hi, folks. We had an awesome conversation about end-to-end encrypted DMs and private accounts yesterday. If you want to keep talking about end-to-end encrypted DMs with my partner Mark and I, anyone working on MLS, anyone thinking about private DMs, we have a room at 3 o'clock. So would love to continue that conversation with people.
Thank you. Again, end-to-end encrypted curious, welcome.
Thank you, Boris. Yes. So let's kick things off again. Main room, and expecting lots of excellent questions and interesting conversations here as well. So, Rudy, I'm going to pass it over to you. Thanks. Let me unmute you.
Mic check. 1, 2. All right, fine. All right. So, when I originally said yes to doing this talk, I thought it was going to be like 50 people, and everyone would know me, and I would know everybody, and I wouldn't have to like introduce myself or like what Black Sky is. And I told myself that everyone's going to know each other, so I'm going to just cause a little bit of trouble. And then Boris said it's like 300 people, 170 people in person, a bunch of people online. And then, that sounds like a lot of people, so maybe people don't know me. And, I'm like, all right, well, I'll keep it chill. And then I came here and it seemed like a lot of folks like knew the different work that I do with Risky and with Black Sky. And I'm like, oh, I think they like me. And so I told Boris that, okay, cool, I still would chill because of that. And I woke up today and I was like, nah, I'm gonna cause some trouble. I view my position as the protocol problem child. I specifically think that I'm an entrepreneur because I have problems with authority and I don't like following rules. If you met my mom, one of the first stories she'd probably tell you is how I used to run around our village in Guyana just like screaming F you to anyone. Not because I was mad, but because it was fun. I liked being the antagonist. And if you know the origins of Black Sky's green list, if you know, you know. A lot would make sense. This is a 50 Cent reference. I tried, I can't change, I'll always be the same. So I will introduce myself a little bit. You may have heard of me, or you may have heard of Black Sky. The long story short is I founded Black Sky 2 years ago. It is what I assume is the largest Black community on the decentralized web. It is one of the biggest app protocol implementations built in Rust. Over 1.5 million people have used the Black Sky feeds. We get about 370,000 people viewing the feeds every month. We have an 8-person volunteer moderator team, all compensated, if they hit certain thresholds. And the implementation is over 100,000 lines of code. Some of that is code gen, but a lot of it's not. And I am now, as of February, a fellow within the Applied Social Media Lab at the Berkman Klein Center at Harvard University. Thank you. They provide me with funding and cool opportunities to connect with people. I'm also, very importantly, a mutual aid organizer at We the People NYC. It influences a lot of my thinking on things. And basically, the way I view it is that Git push origin main has led me to Harvard. It's also led me to getting doxxed by white supremacists. It has led me to being mentioned on CNN, and has almost got me going broke a couple times in trying to do this work. So I mentioned mutual aid. Dr. Tressie McMillan Cotton, who is notably not on Blue Sky, wrote this beautiful article that I found about the difference between mutual aid and charity when I was doing research on a previous project I worked on called Paper Tree. And we're short on time, so I'll just kind of skim some parts of this. But it emphasizes horizontal networks of solidarity. It looks like members of a community sussing out what each member, like what members need, that can look like a online social media group. These all, tie back to, community and building community needs. I blocked out the New York Times because, fuck the New York Times. This is one part of the mutual aid work that we do with We the People and Bushwick Ida Mutua. I don't really love Dean Spade's everything that is written, but some things I find really helpful in like the framing of the difference between a mutual aid organization and traditional organizations. Some folks are here are building public benefit corporations, nonprofits, etc. Even though Black Sky is a Delaware C Corp, I don't operate it like that. I operate it like a mutual aid group. There's a very funny thing there that says, beg, borrow, and steal supplies. I know mutual aid groups that literally do that, and that is kind of my mindset in how I build Black Sky. Boris said yesterday that no one here are enemies, but I don't think that necessarily means we're all friends. Just because we all believe in decentralized tech does not mean we align on values, and that's important because good intentions can still lead to anti-patterns. And something I didn't consider that I was talking to Blaine and Nick on our walk over here this morning is that crucially, it also means that as a developer community, we are all the more robust by having to cooperate between different actors with different values in the system. But I just want you to know my values. And that is as summed up by software as resistance. Earlier I mentioned the word village. I think Black Sky has taken a village. I think there's some people who, because of the traditional white-founded cult of personality kind of tech companies, think that one person can kind of come up with some of this stuff and build it. That is not the case. Black Sky is what it is because of all the people who, some of the folks up here. So Avetta sent out the first invites for Black users on Blue Sky. Clinton has, who's in the room right now, I'm getting emotional. That's don't cry. Clinton has committed, built a bunch of stuff for Risky. Dr. K literally came up with the how-tos for our moderation. Linda is the reason there's a bunch of folks here today from Black Sky. And Natalie, who's been building a bunch of cool stuff for us to help make Black Sky more decentralized with a tool called Safe Skies that I will get into a little bit later. And a bunch of other folks, I will keep getting emotional if I keep talking about all the things that they've done for Black Sky. Cool. So I think a lot of people cite Twitter as an app that put a lot of Black cultural practices into it. A lot of Black Twitter. But I actually think Cash App is another really cool example. So someone did this research that was when asked about motivations that prompted ongoing use of Cash App by African Americans, participants attributed aspects like traditions of mutual aid, sustaining informal economies within Black communities, along with accessibility of the platform. And so for me, I think this is an important distinction, that the technology didn't necessarily invent mutual aid, but it's used for it. And it's how are the affordances of the system that you're working in can be used for the aims that you're trying to achieve, which is a lot of how I approach App Protocol. And so the TLDR of all this is I'm a conduit of practices. I didn't come up with all this stuff. This song is a song I really like. I was singing it as I was walking through here just now. It's a soca song. It's my great-great-grandmother passed it down, my great-grandmother passed it down, my mother get it from my granny, and mommy gave it to me. And there was a TikTok trend of Caribbean folks with this as the sound, and it was just all the things that they kind of like randomly do, like banging a steel spoon against a pot to like knock the food off, or like putting the way you put food in your palm to taste it, or certain hygienic products we use. And I also think of that, like Jean-Michel Basquiat has a quote that if you want to talk about influence, man, then you've got to realize that influence is not influence, it's simply someone else's idea going through my new mind. All right, so the name of this talk is Beyond Horseless Carriages. There is there's this, the Benz motor wagon. This was the first automobile. And it was literally a horse-drawn carriage with an engine. So literally a carriage without a horse. And I feel like this is where we're at with App Protocol. It's just like lots of horseless carriages, lots of things that look like stuff that we built before, but with new technology. And so I'd really like for folks, well, I think it's important, right? Like new technologies, it's like a pattern that happens. New technologies imitate the old technologies that they're replacing. It makes it understandable for folks, so there's like a benefit to that. But if we never move past that, then we don't really reap the full benefits of the innovation. So I particularly wanted this to be the topic of my talk because lots of folks reach out to me to see how we can work together. And I think this is where like there is sometimes a misalignment in some of the just the underlying values and principles, you know what I mean? So our first contradiction to the like, okay, move beyond horseless carriages is that, like Ted mentioned yesterday, a blue sky is kind of like a skeuomorphism. It looks a lot like Twitter. This left-hand side, for folks, is Ted's post on Blue Sky. Right-hand side is a post from Twitter/X. And it's funny because even in Ted's post, he said that the app is a skeuomorphism that people grok and understand, and I find that funny just because grok is right there on the thing. So yeah, and then people even refer to things as like TikTok clones, Twitter clones, but you're building on a whole new underlying structure, so it's not really a clone because a clone is a copy. Skeuomorphisms are helpful. They help people with familiar designs, right? This is, a calculator folks may have used in school, and then the calculator app that's on your phone. It was funny when I pulled this image off the internet, but I was gonna maybe just take a screenshot of my iPhone, and I found there's a new setting for math notes, and that was weird for me, because that was a completely different, so where the skeuomorphism actually was helpful. It was like, I didn't have to look up I didn't need a tutorial to use this calculator, but I do need a tutorial to know what the hell math notes are. I assume it's like some AI thing, but I don't know. So this lowers the barrier to entry for folks migrating, and that has been, really helpful for people. People often refer to Blue Sky, who are maybe vaguely aware of it, as this Twitter. It's exactly Twitter, actually. My tattoo artist referred to it as exactly Twitter. However, you also have, what I find that's important with Black Sky as a community is they recognize that it is not exactly Twitter, because they know that Rudy runs Black Sky and that I have control over the experience. Skeuomorphisms, again, I'm a big fan of them myself. As I mentioned in my previous project, Paper Tree. I didn't know the word for it back then, but I did make Paper Tree look like a bank account. So Paper Tree was a way for people to pool funds and share. Basically, I was trying to make a digital mutual aid product. And falling in line with another cultural practice called susus that I always heard about growing up. And yeah, so it was a way, it kind of also, if you're from the crypto world, like a multi-sig wallet, blah, blah, blah. People pool funds and other people can approve it before the funds get transferred. And yeah, the idea was a shared community bank account, so I made it look like a bank account. And that makes it really easy to understand. You didn't even need to know what a susu was. But we can't stop at just imitating. we have the ability with App Protocol to create new experiences, give people more control, allow communities to curate their content, and really empower community builders, if not just the users themselves. I feel like there's actually, it's like the comparisons are often between big social media platforms or these huge Goliath-like corporations, and then the complete opposite is like empowering end users, but like something that I always get tripped up about is like end users kind of want to use a thing. They don't necessarily want or need to know the underlying stuff. They just need to know that there's something new that they can do. Yeah, I mean, like these folks have like kids. They don't need to know what a PDS is. Like, so another contradiction to this is that like I do think we can learn from the past. This was a cool talk. I feel like I do a lot of like looking into things from the past, and this was a cool book about, and a talk about kind of like a queer history of the internet and talking about BBS systems that were specific for communities. They weren't dealing with global social media problems. They still had intra-community problems, which is a whole concept that I don't think too many people are like familiar with, but you deal with small world problems, and small world problems don't require or don't like you don't need AI to do content moderation for a smaller community. You don't need to worry about like the problems that have occurred because of global timelines and centralized algorithmic feeds. And super ironic. And boom. So yeah, I like to draw parallels between the current state of the internet with like older systems. Like this is on the far left-hand side. This is like the Universal Black Pages, which was like one of these like early internet resources. There was Afro. I think it was like AfroNet BBS. Lots of folks know about Black Planet. Omar Wasso is a huge inspiration to me. You know, folks like to talk about Black Twitter specifically and draw comparisons. And then there's Black Sky. There's a common thread between all these things because I view it as like a specific kind of practice of information sharing, and it's just using the new technology to enact that. I just added this slide because Aaron mentioned that like you could like look to the Black Panthers, and it wasn't that long ago. The Black Panthers are still alive. This is Bobby Rush towing heat, and in the far left, that's Fred Hampton. And that is me and We the People with Bobby Rush. He can still do push-ups. He still cries about Fred Hampton. You know what I mean? And they look to the new generation to see what we got going on. So just say, they are there, the elders and ancestors are there. You can ask them. Cool. Where I particularly see an interesting space here is this like path to a zillion. So there's obviously not a zillion human beings on the planet. By the way, if you've asked me about what my talk is going to be about or anything in the last couple of days, I basically give you this spiel. The Fediverse felt very concerned with 50 to 100 person style communities. Blue Sky is paving the way to like a 4 billion person like social network, but decentralized. That's really cool. There's not anything in this middle area that I call like subreddit-sized, internet forum-sized communities. That is the size of Black Sky. Now like I say a zillion because if you ever looked at the Big Sky repo, it says store a zillion users of PDS like repos with more than operation, blah blah blah. But that's the scale that the network is supposed to scale to. That's cool. But then if there's only, like that just seems so weird to me if there's just, you either have 50 or 100 or you have billions. It's a big gap. And so I'm very interested in this middle space. I think I would like to see a future internet made of many autonomous communities instead of these either a giant silo or just basically a slightly large group chat. And I think that if we're building this infrastructure for a more open web, I'd like Black Sky to kind of be a toolkit for other folks to build similar sized communities. With the goal of letting each community be self-governable, hosting their own data, set your own moderation rules, customize your algorithms, but very importantly, still be connected to the wider web. I think it was one of the Amoya fellows who had mentioned that, like, that a lot of times people attempt to build these like black apps. There were black browsers. There's like Spill. Folks bring up Spill to me from time to time. And then there's like, what people find, some of the feedback is that, oh, it's kind of like second rate. And so it doesn't really get adoption. And I think that, like, while I'm sure there's like a bunch of stuff in that, one of the things that's like, I think is a fundamental misunderstanding is that I don't think you want to just be like cordoned off in your community. I do believe that you want to have a place, but positioned within a wider network. You still want access to all the things, and then you just want a section, for yourself. And then in that section, be able to have kind of your own rules. That's my personal belief. And I think there's a lot of other people who share that belief, and I want to help them get set up on stuff. Case actually we were chatting the other day and had this, we're talking about moderation of older communities and all these clever ways that people have like built things and like just approached this problem, because you do that. And I think a very funny thing to me about people building apps on AppProto and not wanting to do content moderation is fine, right? You as a developer, I guess that's fine. But something that shouldn't be misunderstood is there are people who actually like that. They view it as like community care. It's not just a thing you do because you have to. And so perhaps people should consider how you build things that allow more people, like allow those people to do the work. There's folks who, the Black Sky was able to kind of build a funding model out of it, but there's people who do like subreddit moderation for equally sized communities, and there's no business model for that. So yeah, I use I often talk about like dotted line communities. And when I explain to folks who are using Black Sky, it's like, you never post specifically to Black Sky, but it is kind of like a place, right? There's this kind of area, and it is different from Black Twitter, because when people talk about that, that's just maybe it's who you follow or whatever. But no, like with Black Sky, there's a place you go to, but that place is not really separate. All right, so it's just like, it's kind of squishy. And Darius Kazemi gave a great talk previously about squishy amoeba-like objects, and how when folks were designing the ARPANET, they had these diagrams, and like some of these services are very clear, right? Stuff looks like queues, or they look like some type of it's like some buffer thing. And then these like handlers and interpreters are just kind of like literally squiggly lines, because they're kind of amorphous. They may represent one thing, they may represent a couple things. And then he drew this like parallel to these communities that there's like, you can see a circle for around this like local area, and then they have connections to other communities, and then you can kind of like draw an area around that as just kind of like a more defined community. And it's like neighborhood. And that's how I kind of think of like Black Sky. It's like a lot of the early on, I was adding people by hand and looking at who they follow, and then I just kind of put them into the feed, and then I was adding other people as they came on in their friend groups that they brought on, And then it became this one big thing called Black Sky. But it was really early on. It was actually like 30 different communities. One of the biggest ones being like black academics, like the educators. And for one of my other spicy takes, and I should have actually, I meant to make this interactive and ask people to raise their hands if they knew what a car file was or how to open one. Because to me, I find it very interesting that we say it's decentralized, right? Folks are not doing content moderation themselves, and then not necessarily understanding the primitives of the protocol. And so if Blue Sky disappeared literally tomorrow, because we wouldn't know, right? We wouldn't know the internal financials. How would you just keep the network running? That's even ignoring a relay being there, blah, blah, blah. Everyone's just kind of assuming someone else, I guess, will will pick things up. And yeah, so I'm more about let's bring that to the forefront. You know, let's build our own infrastructure. So, you know, we built myself, Clinton, other contributors, Ripperoni. We built a PDS from scratch in the risky implementation. We're now working on a relay. You know, I was talking to D. Holmes the other day, and I was like, I just thought this is what we were doing. I thought that was the goal of the whole enterprise. But at the same time, I know that hosting stuff is like out of folks' reach. You know, the problem with decentralized technology is always that no one ever wants to run their own servers. And so, you know, I put that little deploy to Heroku thing because that is something that we would like to do. Just someone should do it. Someone should. I mean, I'm giving sauce away again. You know what I mean? But someone should do it. Yeah, and shout out to folks like North Sky because I think that's cool. I think people should. I saw there's a lot of pushback on them. I think that's weird. I think that people should host infrastructure and build communities around it. So another thing that we're now in the section of the talk where I talk about like the actual, like beyond, because a cool thing that Aaron had talked about, and there was the question from Tony, I think, about what are people doing? What are the like features people want? I think we should build those things. You know what I'm saying? I think we should build. Are we going to wait for a private state, or are we going to build private spaces? It could be backwards compatible. It could not be. But if, you know, for me, when I joined Blue Sky, the reputation among black folks was how anti-black it was. Now people complain that they can't scroll the Black Sky feed after 7 p.m. And that's, you know, good problems to have, et cetera. And then the other thing I get tagged with on a every 2 days is that they want a private space in addition to the Jumbotron. So me, I'm just gonna try to like work on shipping that for folks. And then when there's a private state solution, y'all work that all out, we'll put that in there. Another thing that I just wanna say, write your own, create your own shit. Like make your own rules. Like Ban from TV was an early feature that I shipped. You know, Aaron talked about listening to the most vulnerable. I think the most vulnerable will ship what they need. I knew ahead of time that people were gonna harass the Black Sky feed. So when they did it, when it materialized, I had that ready. And this is like not a thing that like came with the affordances. When I talk about sometimes like, I hope the Blue Sky folks still like me after this New Yorker interview that I did. But I'm like, sometimes I do things that like, I know it's not like a part of the protocol or what you intended, but like I'm, you know, like putting a safety feature into a feed that was aligned around a community is like one of those things. It's like, you know, hack on stuff that like makes it work for you. Another thing, this is Safe Skies. So something that comes up for me in conversations is like, okay, app protocol is decentralized, but is Black Sky decentralized? It is still a lot of like the stuff that shows on a feed, like I designed the rules of like what does not get promoted in the content of that. And now I'm hitting limits of like just literal, just like I cannot fundraise and like work with other organizations and do content moderation, do the escalation queue, monitor the feed, do like DevOps. I can't do all those things. And so, yeah, we're building, and Ozone doesn't allow you to do some of this stuff, right? And it's like, it wasn't the fit for it. So Natalie Davis is building this tool called Safe Skies, software against a fearful environment. And it's gonna allow me to like onboard additional moderators that don't necessarily do the like stuff that gets reported to us kind of content, or not necessarily stuff that's like outside of Black Sky, but like it'll allow me to decentralize the piece of, you know, if someone says something anti-Semitic, and not only do I want to label it, I want to take it out the feed because I have that agency. That's a database query I have to do right now. This is going to be like a front end, mobile friendly. Ozone is not mobile friendly. This will be able to like allow folks to do some of this stuff, and you know what I mean. So long story short, don't have the tools for what you need to moderate your communities. Build them. Make credible exit more credible. You know what I mean? This is again, the car files, like you can export all your Blue Sky data today at any point in any given time. You can go to settings, account, export my car file. I'd never opened a car file before. And then this is something this was actually an exercise for the folks who were interviewing for the Rust developer that we were doing. It was like build a diff of the car files. And I hope this is actually right. This is this was one of the good solutions for it. But yeah, and do other wacky shit, you know what I mean? Like build a local first app, put a PDS in a browser, like build some weird app view, like, you know what I mean? Build like Cerulean the relay, like that's like, it just crawls the like small PDS. Do whatever you want, you know what I'm saying? I really like this, I just wanted to have a slide with this piece. We were hiring, I think we're in the final stages of it, but you know, another thing that like, for folks of like bringing people into the project is like, people ask me about the Rust stuff. And I just want to say that like part of the hiring was like really cool. It's like people are like, oh, the only things that they can use Rust for is like video games and blockchains. And now you have like this thing that you could use it for and like contribute and work on it, and it has a huge impact on a community of people. So yeah, what other people think does not matter. What the devs in the Discord think does not matter. Build for the community that you want to work with and you care about, and figure out what they need and just ship it. TLDR, march to your own beat, and if I could be of any help, and Black Sky could be of any help, say hi.
Thank you so much, Rudy. All right. Folks have questions. Yeah. Come on up, Nick.
I feel like you're going to ask a hard question.
Hi. First of all, I love and respect you. This is fantastic, and I am so glad that you're on the Lexicon Community Technical Steering Committee. I think skeuomorphism is super cool, and it's also a double-edged sword. And something I think about is, as we're designing apps and lexicons, and we're helping people wrangle data, how can we make sure that skeuomorphism isn't encouraging bad design or systemic problems, et cetera? How can we ensure that we're not just having a continuance of things from other systems and places? And do you have any thoughts on where you draw the line and how we can be thoughtful on the design of the data structures that we use and how that applies?
It's very, very interesting. I think I always go back to like what are the needs of the folks that you want to build for? So someone else had mentioned this, like they wanted to build a way to generate, like could use a lexicon to like generate a website, long story short. And I don't know, I think one of the things that I'm trying to figure out is like getting into like the lexicon hacking and like getting people, there's lots of stuff there. Stuff is happening in the Discord, it's hard for me, I mean not the Discord, the GitHub discussions, that's hard for me to follow sometimes. Who's involved in the conversations around that stuff? Can the lexicon support some of these other things? I think stuff is just really early in designing lexicons, but I think the cool thing about lexicon community that excites me the most is the fact that it is kind of this like shared resource for coming up with these apps, app schemas and structures that are independent from Blue Sky. I think I would like to see more things move over to lexicon.community, especially like something like com.appproto, the namespace. And then, yeah, I think if there's ways to make the lexicons more like immediately useful for folks, like when we talked about like third party, like is Blue Sky a browser or a microblogging site? Surfacing lexicons, I think, also is another way, because like, yeah, it's just about getting people to adopt it and use it and fitting their needs. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's kind of what brings up for me. Word.
Hey, Rudy. Thanks. This is awesome, and it was like, I was just very like super inspirational because I've been thinking about kind of like medium-sized communities as well, and like not 10 and not a zillion.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you use the words like second rate, which I think is sometimes like a label that gets put onto something that's functional sometimes, but maybe not as polished in the traditional like VC funded way of thinking about things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was wondering if you had thoughts on like how do we encourage more kind of like vernacular, to borrow that word, community building. Like what are the tool sets for people who don't know Rust, who don't know Go, who can't approach, cobbling together something that's still pretty technical, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the stuff with the protocol is always going to be tough, as like there's always just that technical barrier to entry of like who can kind of like understand it all and like implement solutions for folks. So I feel like I guess I sidestepped that problem by thinking about the people who are very determined about like building the communities for folks. And now what I will say, what that brings up for me, is that I talk a lot about how ozone, community moderation. People have like kind of like shitted on community moderation a little bit because of there not being too many of them. And like if you think about how to like get started with that today, you have to know how to build a moderation team, like come up with moderation policies and deploy ozone and like know DevOps. So I think the easiest thing to just do is like get the technical stuff out the way for people. Like, yeah, like that's kind of my answer for that.
What's up, Rudy?
What up?
Good shit.
Thank you. Appreciate you, Tony.
Yeah. You kind of like alluded to like after we get through the skeuomorphism like phase, like kind of building a new vision for social. Could you talk about like generally what you see that as, and then more specifically for Black Sky, like what you see that as?
Yeah, I guess what's tough for me is I'm not really a front-end person, so I really do like building these like back-end services that just enable certain things to happen. I think stuff like what you were working on and you're talking about like, okay, like can you build tools that, like what you were working on doesn't look anything like a front-end app.
Do you want to shout out what Tony's working on?
Yeah. So Tony's working on this tool called Savant, right? Savant, and it's kind of like, can you build a feed and like by like entering like a prompt, and like it's trying to like leverage the like public nature of the app protocol data and social graphs, and then make that really easy for people to identify content. Particularly like maybe if they're like the scientific community, can they like find all the folks doing like quantum computing research and talking about that and sharing papers? That is cool. Like all the feed builder stuff was really cool in the beginning because the idea of it was, can you give end users the ability to shape their social experience? But then it was like, use regex. And You know what I mean? And then it was like, and then, you know, with all due respect to everybody, I mean, but like, or like a no-code feed builder, but like, when you're like, use natural language, like as a search, like I think stuff like that is really cool. That again goes back to what I was just talking about, like reduce the technical barrier for people. People don't want to have to think, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, once you start from, instead of the solution, from the human aspects, like the people you have in mind, like you started with like you had a certain set of users that you wanted to build for. I was telling you stuff and you were like, I don't even care about those folks. And I was like, I like that. Like exclude, like don't build for everybody. Like there's some, it goes back to like some kind of like annoying Ask YC advice. It's like you don't need 100 people who kind of like you need 10 people that love you. Like that's really like it in a nutshell. And so if you build for those folks, I think you invent new paradigms that like fit whatever their needs are. Yeah. Word.
Hey, great talk. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I was at a What's the Future of Black Twitter summit about 2 years ago. Frankly, I didn't belong there. But it was really interesting because one of the things that came from the group of people that were there, it was only like 25 people, but like from Black Twitter, was that they, you know, the reaction to the idea of decentralization was, we don't believe in your utopia.
Right.
And we're not afraid of Twitter because we're used to this stuff.
Right.
Right? Mm-hmm. And so I just wanted to ask, like, how do you talk to your community about, you know, this sort of utopian idea when people are kind of afraid, like, not even bothered about it? And I think you know, not just Black Twitter, Black Sky faces that, like everyone faces that. So I think you've done a really amazing job on that. So.
Oh, thank you. I was having this talk with this dude Mike yesterday, and he was like trying to kind of like scare me, and like I think there's a lot of like white folks I feel like that are like, oh, this is like such a perilous time. I'm like, it was always perilous for, you know what I'm saying? I got locked up last year doing protesting. Like, you know what I mean, it's like I never felt safe in this country. So the whole, now we don't have constitutional rights. Now people can get away with hurting us. I'm like, that's just so funny to me. And so that's why also I don't give people I don't believe in the you should be scared, that's why you believe in decentralization. I think Black Sky has grown from a place of joy. I think you see a new experience that like, oh, people say like, you can just, one of the most positive things I saw was like people signed up and they were like, oh, Black Sky is like one of the most kind of affirming and joyful experience, and it was just 100 replies of just like, yeah. And I think that made this like weird effect of people saying like, oh, like it's, yeah, I mean, it's just like a honeymoon phase right now. But I think what you see is like, no, like I control I mean, hopefully make it, but I control the algorithm, you know what I'm saying? So it's not, you see what I have like, I've felt like I've learned over time that people want to see. And I try to remove the stuff people don't want to see, and I try to foster the stuff that is like, I try to encourage things that are community building. Like the Black Sky algorithm has never been simple or straightforward. There's like 100 lines of things that remove content. I'm trying to find ways to like this is where like the social stuff interacts with the technical stuff, because it's like, how do you design something that achieves the thing you want? And sometimes that means you have some like shitty Python script that deletes posts every and runs every 1 minute. Sometimes that means you improve the indexes, you change some strings to some date times, and you know what I mean? And now the trending query loads quicker, and so now people can feel that they get caught up on things faster. Maybe that means you recognize that big accounts have 100,000 followers, but that is not necessarily all Black folks, and it's not they may get likes quicker, but that doesn't mean that those are the folks who should show at the top of the trending feed. This is how it all kinds of like, I think once you can't scare people into using something. You build cool shit that like makes them feel good about themselves.
Can I just shout out joy as a motivator is amazing, and also like a recognition that terrible things and good things coexist at the same time, and like thinking about both of those together and how you want to rank and prioritize them is really important.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and like mutual aid survival work, that was also part of that Dean Spade. slide. Where?
First, I want to say, Andy, Scott Forstall will fight you over skeuomorphism, so be careful with that. But I want to say I'm proud of you, right? Like, you know, from where Black Sky started, like you said, it was literally like, bro, I'm going to take this, right? I want to take this out. I want to have this feed. And I'm like, man, that's a lot of work, you know, but for what and for who? And that's like for me, for us. And that's kind of been your North Star this entire time, right? And so I want to say that in person. I've said it many times, but I want to say in front of everybody that I'm proud of you, you know, just from where it came from, the work that you're putting in, right? And being a young Black leader.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
But yeah, it's kind of sort of like coming off from where blame's coming from in terms of Black Twitter has been entrenched for some time, right? Mm-hmm. And our people are used to things being dangerous, used to things being uncomfortable. And so we can have this, while it's great, it's resilience, but we also have this very stubbornness about us, like, I'm not going anywhere, right? Like, even in places that have let us know they don't want us there. And so my thing to you is, like, how are you going about advocating for Black Sky and letting our people know, like, yeah, of course, like, this is not a step on your resiliency, but here's a space where we're trying to nurture. Here's a space that, like, joy matters, right? And where you can be safe, but you can still be resilient, and you can still do what you need to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. I feel like sometimes people kind of describe me as a community builder, and I don't really think that I, like, built community, because I never invited people. I never promoted. I know. I crafted the space, and what I like to think, you know, it's pretty bad that I don't know why Black Sky grew, but what I like to think is that people saw me solving problems each time, and I think the problem with, like, oh, everything's fine over here, that's also, like, unrealistic. And so I think people recognize that. And then when things were like, when they saw problems come up, they saw that they could reach out to somebody and that person could fix it. So I don't think it, like, stepped on the resiliency, because they saw that we were still resilient, we just had more tools. And so that's what I like to think. I like to think that people just see that, like, a racist troll showed up. Oh, we were able to resolve that. We're able to, you know what I mean, work with the Blue Sky sometimes with, like, their trusted safety team to, like, prevent raiding of the feed. I think it's the fact that there's this rapid response, you know what I'm saying, that we're still fighting, but there's, like, more tools at our disposal versus, like, just everyone quote post this person, everyone block this person. Like, you can still do those things, but then we also have this, like, additional layer. I think that's what has helped personally. Where?
Thank you. We're running a little bit over time.
Yep.
Thank you, Rudy, for all the things that you do and how thoughtful you are about it and the example that you set. Up next, we have Devin, but I'm going to give Boris a moment here to coordinate.
I think we all need a little moment, so if anyone needs a little cry, feel free to do that in a couple minutes. This is the point where you have to make hard choices. So Devin is coming up, the shape of apps to come. We have video, so 3 video builders, Streamplace, Spark, and Skylight. We'll be doing presentations on what they're working on and then move into a joint discussion on video on AtProto. And myself and Nick Jarakines are going to be talking about location data at Geo in the 2 rooms over there. So we'll just have a couple minutes of switchover, including those who would like to join us in the other space. Thank you.